thank you all for coming. I don't know, I think this is it our 5th XR talk? And we're really delighted to welcome Adam Land, who lives in Bishopston at the moment, and who's in our XR group. Adam, as you may have seen from the blurb, is currently doing his Masters with the Centre for Alternative Technology, and he works for Down to Earth, where they're currently involved in building 6 houses for social housing, using local natural materials like sheep walls and wood fibre in Pennard. So he's practicing what he's preaching with, would you call it active housing or passive housing?
I guess sustainable housing. I think it wouldn't be either of those.
Okay. So Adam worked with me on a project in Cardiff, working with young people on a youth conference, and wrote materials for looking at active and passive housing. But I saw Adam's work in Embercombe in Devon when I went there on a retreat, and saw that he built this amazing roundhouse with a grass roof, and I couldn't remember it, but it's reciprocating roof. So you didn't need anything to help it stand up. It's absolutely beautiful. So I was delighted that I know him. I know the person who built that. So we've had some great conversations around this topic, which is of course really important for everybody. Housing is about 25% of our greenhouse gases, and we really need to retrofit our houses in Swansea, and we know that the council has made a start on that. So if you've got questions, if you know the chat facility at the bottom of your screen, so as Adam's talking, if you want to just put a question in the chat, and then after Adam's finished, Judy will make sure that everybody gets the chance to ask their question. You can add a question at any time, and it's lovely to see new people as well as some of our XR stalwarts here.
Oh, hello.
Oh yes, hi everybody. Over to you, Adam.
All right, great. Thank you for that introduction. If I share my screen, can you guys see it?
Yeah, we can see it.
Can you see it? All right, so I guess I'll start by defining what I mean by retrofit, really. It is essentially doing up a building in a way that's sustainable, in a very sort of layman's English. But I thought this quote here is interesting. The greenest building is one that already exists. So I think people, when they picture sustainable building, I definitely picture a brand new building with a turf roof, you know, in a sort of architect magazine, that kind of thing. But I guess the reality is that most of the buildings that are standing now are still going to be there in, you know, 30 years time. So actually retrofit is the kind of less sexy but very necessary cousin of new build sustainable housing. So yeah, Sue kind of introduced me there. I'm concentrated a lot on retrofit for my master's course, but I'm definitely not an expert on the technical sides of it. Like I was thinking of that quote when John Lennon was asked whether he thought Ringo Starr was the best drummer in the world, and he said he didn't even think he was the best drummer in the Beatles. And I think there's probably people here who know more about the technical side of it, but I guess what interests me is how you get that into policy and how you get it to happen, because, you know, a lot of this technology and materials have existed for 40 years, some of them for like 4,000 years, and we haven't started using them. So I'm interested in how we make that happen. That would be interesting to discuss afterwards as well. So yeah, what is retrofit? Sustainable renovation. So in this picture, there's some examples: wall insulation, sustainable heating. So that could be ground source heat pumps, air source heat pumps, even wood burners, that kind of thing. Solar panels, ventilation, air tightness, that kind of thing. Yeah, triple glazed windows, or even putting in double glazed windows on old properties that have only got single glazed. So yeah, why bother? Why even talk about it? The UK's got some of the oldest buildings in Europe, and Wales are actually the oldest in the UK. There's a lot of really old buildings and houses, and 80% of homes we will occupy in 2050 are already standing, which is kind of blew my mind when I saw that, because I guess you picture in 2050 we're going to be living in glass bubbles with hoverboards and all of that kind of thing, but I guess the reality is in 2050 a lot of the homes are going to look like they do now because they're still going to be standing. And there's a little diagram down there showing the age of houses in Wales. So only 25% have been built since 1980, which is when insulation became kind of standard and enforced that people had to do that. So there's obviously a huge chunk of those houses that have got no insulation or have maybe been retrofitted later on. There's also an increased awareness of health in buildings. So I don't know if people have heard of sick building syndrome. So people getting ill and not knowing why they're getting ill, and then removing themselves from buildings, offices or houses, and realizing that it's the house, the materials it's made of, or the damp, humidity, that kind of thing, that is giving them health problems. And I think that people are becoming more aware of this kind of thing. And that, yeah, got their poor air quality and damp and toxicity of paints and finishes, all of that kind of stuff. And also, obviously, I'm preaching to the converted here, but carbon emissions are a massive thing. The diagram on the left-hand side shows emissions in the whole world. So that's roughly from buildings and construction is about a third of all emissions. And then on the right-hand side, this shows in the UK. So building and construction and the operation of buildings is half of our emissions, and everything else is the other half, which again shows we massively need to do something about it. And so Sue mentioned that we're building houses in Pennard. The houses we're building are super high spec, but a lot of the houses that are getting built there will have to be retrofitted in 10 years' time to comply with Welsh insulation targets and energy efficiency, which blows my mind that anyone could be building a house now which won't be future-proofed for 10 years' time. Like, we should be future-proofing houses for 100 years' time, let alone 10 years' time. But yeah, we need to start thinking about how we bring the costs down at this stage. And also, the climate's likely to change. It could get a lot hotter, it could get a lot cooler, but if you insulate a home really well, it performs much better at high temperatures and at low temperatures. So you're kind of hedging your bet by putting in extra wall insulation, window insulation, all of this sort of stuff. So I guess some of the things that people could do, some practical solutions. Quite often in retrofit, they refer to low-hanging fruit. So these are the things that are easy to do, very cost-effective to do, and are gonna, you're gonna have a financial return quite quickly on that. So the number one, if anyone doesn't have their loft insulated, that's the most cost-effective. The payback period is very, very short. You could get the payback period could be 2 years before you've paid it all off. So getting loft insulation up to 400 mil at least is like the first thing to do, really. That's going to cost less than £1,000 and start reducing your bills massively. Fitting a thermostat, again, most people already have this, but people that don't, fitting that. Maintenance, so I don't think people generally think of that with retrofit, but if your windows don't close properly, doors don't close properly, you're going to be losing a lot of heat through that. And then costing slightly more is replacing single glazed windows. So if you've still got single glazed windows, definitely get some double glazing in there. Wall insulation. So if you look at this, these charts here, this is from the Bristolian Guide to Solid Wall Insulation. And if anyone's interested in solid wall insulation, that is the one. It's on the internet. And it's got pretty much every detail you could imagine. They've drawn up in these nice diagrams. with various different styles of houses, age of houses, which would be good for Swansea, which has got a huge range of ages of houses. But it shows the heat loss through different elements. So the sort of browny, sicky colour, that's walls. So in all of the house sizes, that is the most heat gets lost through walls. And then the other one, so yeah, roof is quite low down in there because most houses are already insulated in the roof because it's such an easy method to use. So the different types of wall insulation, this is a study I did of our own house where we live now, which suffers from mold. It has got almost no insulation. 54% of the heat loss was through the walls, so a huge amount. It's the biggest surface area, so obviously the number one thing that you want to insulate, but obviously because it's such a huge area, it can be quite costly. The different options you've got: a cavity wall. So most walls in houses are built, there's two leaves, which is the technical word, but just two walls essentially with a gap in the middle. And houses have generally been built like that since the 1920s, and it's to stop the ingress of moisture, so there's an air gap. But cavity wall insulation is where a shadowy looking man like that comes and drills a hole in the wall, puts a hose in and essentially squirts in insulation, fills the cavity. It's cheap to do. You don't have to knock down any walls or anything. But yeah, it's pretty cost effective. The only issue is that it can increase damp. So if you look at this map, the bits in blue, which we are well into, is basically the places it's not suitable for. So anywhere with driving rain and wind-driven rain, it's not really suitable for. You could end up exacerbating a lot of the problems that you're trying to get rid of with damp and that kind of thing. So what can you do if you can't do cavity wall? External wall insulation is the sort of creme de la creme of wall insulation. So it's the most firmly efficient. It creates a full envelope, so there's no gaps. It goes around all the corners, goes up to the windows, all of that kind of thing. And I've put this as a positive. It can change the aesthetic of a building. So if you're doing up the outside of a building that's pebble dash, you can put whatever finish on it. It could improve it. But obviously, if you've got a beautiful Victorian or period property, covering it in wood fibre or polystyrene and then rendering it could make the building look a lot different. You might not get planning permission for it, that kind of thing. And it's expensive to install, so you've got to put up scaffolding, which is just painfully expensive. And you may need to bring out the eaves, for example, or you may need to alter certain details in the house. So you need the insulation to be covered, so you might have to extend the eaves, which are the hanging out bit of the roof. And it's not suitable for party walls, which are the walls in between two houses, the partition walls, because you'd have to ask your neighbour if they could have it on the inside of their bedroom, which they're probably not going to be up for. So the other option is internal wall insulation. So that's exactly the same material, natural or unnatural, on the inside of the building, which is less disruptive. You don't have to get scaffolding. It's much cheaper because you don't need to spend so much time on the outside of the building. And also, it's not going to change the look of the building. So if you've got a listed building, period building, that kind of thing, internal wall insulation is the most suitable for that. The only issues with that is you bring what's called the dew point into the building. So rather than keeping the whole building warm, you bring the point at which water condenses into the wall. So if there's any wood in there, there's risk of it rotting, all of that kind of stuff, your stud work, lintels, that kind of thing. And obviously it reduces the size of your internal floor. So as an extreme example, if you're using 250 mil of wood fibre insulation on the inside of your room, you're going to be losing that amount of space all the way around. So that's, a significant amount of your room that you're going to lose. If you live in a huge old house with massive rooms, then that's not going to be an issue. But if you live in a pokey little bungalow, you might not be able to afford to lose that. I guess the reality is probably you might want to use a bit of both. So, you know, if you have a beautiful front to your house that you want to keep, you might use internal wall insulation on that. And the back, you might use external wall insulation where it's less likely to, you know, upset the look of the building. A big question, I guess, is whether you use natural or non-natural materials. So I think I go into every situation, I'm like, natural materials, why would you not use it? And there's lots of benefits to that. They're less toxic, they're not going to release toxins to you or when they get thrown away, that kind of thing. They have a low carbon cost, or if they're made from wood, they have a negative carbon cost. So the trees sequester carbon when they're growing, and then they get locked into the building until the building decomposes in 100 years' time, when hopefully we're going to solve this carbon thing, but who knows. And also they're moisture open. So some people refer to it as breathable, which means that when the moisture in your building is high, it absorbs the moisture. And then when the humidity in the room is low, then it will release it. So it keeps the moisture in the air at like a really healthy level. And also older buildings which are already moisture open, such as stone buildings, that kind of thing, you have to use natural materials of that. If you do end up just painting on paint from B&Q, all of that kind of thing, you can end up locking in moisture. And quite often people will think that they've got a moisture problem because a pipe's leaking and all of that sort of stuff. And it's because they've got a cob wall, like earth wall, or they've got a stone wall, and they've just slapped on a load of latex paint or something like that, and it's sealed the water in, and you end up with damp inside the wall. And natural materials are easier to dispose of. So wood fiber boards, for example, you just chuck them on the compost heap or bury it or anything like that. Natural materials are much more expensive. So for example, I think wood fiber, which is the closest to you know, Kingspan polyurethane insulation, is probably 2 or 3 times as expensive per square meter. So you're looking at a bigger cost, and also it's not as good. Doesn't perform quite as well as polystyrene insulation. So you generally need twice as much of it. So you're ending up with a much thicker wall buildup, which can be nice. Like, it's nice to have the look of a very thick, chunky wall, but then also you're going to lose space on the outside and or the inside. And also they don't, you can't mix the two. You can't use a natural material and then paint it with a latex paint or render the outside with a concrete slip, that kind of thing. You'd have to use, if you're using natural materials, you would then have to use lime, clay paints, all of that sort of stuff, which is great, but that's an added cost. And it means that if someone then comes in later down the line and slaps a load of latex paint on, it's going to be pretty damaging for the building. The other one is to increase the air tightness. So that's using a lot of tape, membranes, that kind of thing, to make sure there's not air getting lost out of the building. Because buildings lose a lot of air just through gaps around doors, around windows, that sort of thing. Like, someone was using the analogy of, if you imagine a cash machine in a wall, the size of the cash machine, the entire thing, the box, is the size of the hole in most 2-bed houses. So there's a gap that big in most houses, just added up in the gaps in windows and letterbox, all of that sort of stuff. But in a really high performing house, like a passive house standard, it's this, the air gap is the size of the credit card slot on a cash machine. So it's absolutely tiny. So yeah, you can end up really reducing the amount of energy a building uses by just improving the air tightness. It's relatively cheap to do. If you get up to a really high level, you'd have to put in some sort of mechanical ventilation with heat recovery, which I won't go too much into, but again, it's another thing you've got to worry about maintaining and getting someone around to fix and all of that sort of stuff. Yeah, solar energy is an obvious one. I think a lot of people think of solar panels when they think of sustainable retrofit or even building. It's got quite a good payback period. So in a decade, you'd have probably paid back what you put into them. And if you're doing the external wall insulation, you've got the scaffolding up, all of that sort of stuff. It's quite easy then to just get someone in to put the solar panels on. Solar panels are really cheap at the moment. It's the rest of the stuff, the inverter, that sort of thing, which can add up. But if you've got someone on the roof anyway, you might as well put solar panels on. There can be issues. It obviously massive depends on whether you've got a south-facing roof. So if you haven't got that, then solar panels are not going to work generally. You're only going to get a couple of hours of electricity. And also if you've got trees or anything like that, then you're probably not going to be able to get solar panels. And also, yeah, there can be planning issues if you live in a listed building or something like that. But yeah, on the right is a picture of some modern solar panels where they're set into the tiles of the roof. And for me, that looks very visually appealing. Like, I can't understand people's objection to solar panels, but there we go. Yeah, just quickly on the costs. External wall insulation is generally about over £100 per square metre, probably looking at £150, £200 if you're going into wood fibre. So to put that in context, a detached house to fully do external wall insulation would be 17.5 grand, which is a pretty significant cost. And a terraced house about £7,000, just because you're only doing the front and the back. So a full house retrofit to passive house standards, or Retrofit, which is the passive house standard for retrofit. Passive house is the golden grail of efficiency ratings. Basically, it's like a voluntary rating that people can get passive house to come in and evaluate your building, and if you get that stamp to say it's passive house, you can go on the list and of their houses and that sort of thing. But it's generally quite hard to get to. It's a very very difficult set of rules, and to get a 55% reduction, you're looking at £450 to £500 per square metre. This is floor space, bearing in mind that the average cost of building a house is between £1,500 and £2,000 per square metre. So you're looking at spending a quarter of the value of a house again to retrofit it to that standard. Yeah, full house retrofit to the Retrofit standard could be £200,000, and that you're looking at with that a 99-year payback. So the savings on your bill would be around about 100 years. So what the takeaway from this is, currently costs won't be paid for by bill savings, and we'll look a little bit at that and how we need to get around that in terms of getting retrofit to happen in a sort of wider level. So why is it not happening? Like Sue mentioned, there is a little bit of retrofit happening in Swansea, particularly. They've chosen to be the first place where they're going to start retrofitting council houses, and it's definitely in the discourse in government. Like, government are talking about it. There's a lot of hot air around it, but not at the scale that we need. It's estimated that we need to retrofit 500,000 homes a year. So this is in the UK, to reach 2050 emissions targets. So that is like a really staggering number of homes that need to be retrofitted, given that at the moment there's several hundred being retrofitted each year in the UK. So yeah, we mentioned the low-hanging fruit. A lot of that's already been done. So I'd be interested afterwards to see who's got loft insulation, because I'd imagine most people have got loft insulation. So a lot of the easy methods, the sort of easy measures, have been done already. So now we're getting into the harder stuff, the external wall insulation, the windows, solar panels, all of this kind of stuff. And yeah, as I just mentioned, retrofit currently doesn't pay for itself in bill savings. partly because the industry is very young, so the products are expensive, and there's not enough people that can do it. But also, I don't know whether it is ever going to pay for itself in bill savings, and whether we need to move away from that as our primary driver in terms of retrofit. So yeah, again, why is it not happening? So there's been a lack of policy drivers from the government. So basically the government haven't pulled their finger out. There was the 2013 Green Deal. So this was like a pay-as-you-save scheme. Like, people might have heard of it, maybe some people got on it. But the idea was that you would install a retrofit measure, and then the amount that you'd save on your bills each month would be used to pay back the loan that you'd taken out from the government. It failed massively, and very embarrassingly for the government. It was introduced by the coalition government. And part of the reason for that was because the interest rates were 7%, which is two times, maybe even more, 2 times the market interest rate, even for mortgages. So why would anyone choose to take that interest rate? It's massive. And the maximum loan you could take out was £10,000. And as we saw before in the previous slide, £10,000 doesn't get you very far in terms of retrofit. Maybe you could external wall insulate a bungalow, but when you get up to two bed, 3 bed houses, 10 grand isn't going to get you very far. There's been similar schemes in France and Germany, but they were much more effective and there was much bigger uptake. So interest rates in France were really, really low, and in Germany they set them at 0. So the inflation hit was taken by the government. And also the maximum value was much higher. So I think in Germany it was 35,000 euros, and in France it was 20,000 euros or something like that. It was a much more like ambitious goal, really. And also in France, they reduced VAT on all retrofits. So in terms of labour, in terms of biomaterials, that kind of thing, from, I think theirs is similar to the UK, so 18%, something like that. And they've reduced that to 5%, 5.5% on retrofit measures. So obviously that's giving stimulus to people getting into the industry, that kind of thing. And an example from Manchester, which they've got what's called the Group Work Assistance Loan, which is a very wordy name for it, but essentially households can borrow up to 25 grand, and they don't have to pay it back until you sell the house. So obviously when you sell the house, frees up a lot of capital. You then have to pay back the loan. Obviously you can pay it back before, but yeah, it takes a lot of the risk out of it, because you're never going to get hit with a £25,000 loan repayment when you can't afford it, kind of thing. So yeah, the other thing is the landlord's dilemma, which essentially is who pays for it in the situation of private rental housing. So the number of private rental homes has risen massively, especially in Wales. So like a lot of people are seeing a good opportunity to make money. They're getting buy-to-let mortgages and then renting out their homes. But in that situation, the landlord's got no incentive to retrofit their house because they're not making any bill savings. And the person that's renting the house has got no incentive because, for example, I live in a house that I think isn't particularly good, but I'm not going to spend a huge amount of money retrofitting it because the value of the house is going to go into the hands of the landlord. And I think this is a pretty big issue, is how do you do it without actually forcing the landlord to do it? So by creating policy that they have to introduce a certain level, because the levels of energy efficiency that they have to reach at the moment are incredibly low, really, really low. And also, yeah, the houses that are rented out by landlords are the oldest and the worst in comparison to owner occupied and also social housing. So social housing is almost the simple route because it's either owned by a housing association, it's owned by the council. They manage the housing, they've got an incentive to improve that for the residents. So social housing in comparison to private rental is much better. It's obviously not great, but yeah, the route to that is a little simpler. Yeah, and the only way I can see is with increased regulation for landlords, gradually increasing it year on year, the levels that they have to reach, and being clear about that. So they know that in 10 years' time, they're going to have to reach these goals, whether they do it in step changes or whether they just go the whole hog and do it now, so it's future proof. Yeah, because I can't see a way of incentivizing it otherwise. Yeah, just a couple more slides. This is about the lack of knowledge and skilled labor. So retrofit is pretty specialized in that the materials are quite new. The way of working is quite new. There's a lot of details that need to be thought about as how you create a thermal envelope around a building without having gaps where heat can get out, around eaves and all of that sort of stuff. And people who are in college aren't getting trained on these things. Most of the people working in the construction industry don't know about these things. So to get the construction industry up to speed, there's going to be required a lot of training and knowledge. That's people existing in the industry already, and also people who are coming into it. There's an estimate here that in order to reach the targets, which we talked about before, which is 500,000 homes every year, we need to increase the labour force. This is just in retrofit to 480,000, which is triple what we have at the moment, which is pretty huge. But I guess you could look at that in a negative way, in that, you know, this is a huge mountain to climb, but also in the people, you know, constantly striving to create jobs and talking about, you know, justifying nuclear and all of these really destructive industries because they create jobs. It's like there's this enormous opportunity to create jobs. Why don't we use it? And I like this picture because generally when you see articles about training and that sort of thing, you see people fresh out of college in their sort of 18, 19, 20s. And I like that here it's representing the sort of, you know, the slightly older generation in the construction industry. And there's a big opportunity for everyone to learn in that as well. It's not just people coming out of college that can learn about retrofit kind of thing. Yeah, so moving forwards, UK government have not done that well, really. The build, I've cut out Boris Johnson's head from this because I thought it'd be best for everyone. But yeah, that, as part of this build campaign, they started this Build Back Better grant, which is essentially, it was meant to be a stimulus to help retrofit. So it's positive that they're talking about it and trying to do something about it, but it was a huge failure again. The grants were up to £5,000 for most households, £10,000 for very low income households, which could be insulation, low carbon heating, that kind of thing. But yeah, it failed after 6 months. So yeah, this was at the midway through last year. It's now failed, it's closed up. And yeah, people in the industry have put it down to the fact it was so hard to access the funding. And also with a lot of policy around sustainable building and retrofit, it's a lack of stability in policy. So with the Green Deal, which was essentially trying to motivate, the Code for Sustainable Homes. There's so many different schemes that have gone on and not done very well. But yeah, the Code for Sustainable Homes, which was meant to see all of the homes being built in the UK by 2016 be zero carbon. The industry was getting ready for that. They were getting ready for that target. And then it got scrapped by the coalition government in 2010 or 11 or whatever. And everyone in the industry was just like the rug was pulled out. Even these huge house builders were like, well, if that's, you know, the policy and those are regulations, we'll conform to it kind of thing. And then suddenly this policy was taken away. And they've spent all this money investing in getting ready for this zero carbon home thing, and then it's like you don't have to do it, and it becomes non-competitive. So I think actually you need strong policy, but you need that policy to be stable and for the industry to get ready, because the construction industry is incredibly slow moving. It's a huge machine with a lot going on in it, and it needs the policy to be stable and gradually moving in a certain direction. If it's chopping and changing, you're just going to get people going to the lowest common denominator, which is building breeze block houses with no insulation or very low insulation. Yeah, so this is in Wales, which Sue touched on. So this is a quote from Julie James. Julie James is on it. I really like Julie James. She seems to be definitely taking things in the right direction. But she said, ensuring our existing housing stock is as energy efficient as possible is vital if we are to meet our ambitious target to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions by 95% by 2050. So that was this year. And they've launched the optimised retrofit programme in Wales, which aims to do whole house retrofit. So whole house is where you look at a whole house, you look at where heat has been lost, you look at how energy has been created, you look at the fabric of the building, and then you suggest a load of retrofit measures that are going to work together. So you can sometimes introduce one measure that can have knock-on effects and have a negative effect in other areas. So if you just insulate all 4 walls but don't insulate the roof, then you're going to end up with getting cold spots and condensation and mold and that kind of thing. So yeah, looking at a whole house. And the aim is to retrofit all 1.4 million properties in Wales by 2050, which maybe that's not soon enough, but even that is a huge target in itself. So yeah, it does feel like Wales is moving in the right direction and definitely better than the UK government. But again, none of this is targeting the private rental sector or even the owner-occupied sector. So yeah, there's a list of references if anyone wants to see. I can send, if I send Sue the slides, anyone can have a look through them. And I don't know how you could access that. I'm sure they could get posted somewhere. But yeah, thanks for listening. If anyone's got any questions or just comments that they want to talk about, because like I said, I'm definitely not an expert in any of this. I've done a lot of research, but yeah, other people's thoughts would be really interesting to hear.
There are some questions, Adam, in the chat.
Will stop working.
Are you ready for them now?
Yeah, I'm just technical.
Okay. Well, Peter Anderson has one. Are you there, Peter? Can't see him.
I'm on a bus, so if you could read it, that'd be great.
Okay, he says, thanks, Adam, for a great talk. Do you think do-it-yourself shiplap cladding with insulation behind it is a good option for external retrofit? And any idea of the cost for that on a detached house?
Yeah, I think you could either go with polystyrene insulation around it, and you can just shiplap straight over that, and then fix into battens behind the insulation. Or you could use wood fiber, but if you're using wood fiber, you'd have to protect it from moisture, so you'd have to be looking at some sort of membrane around it, which is totally possible, some sort of breather membrane. The only thing with shiplap, I like shiplap, I like the look of it, but there's no gaps in shiplap, so you can end up with moisture sitting behind the cladding. So you'd have to think about that in terms of ventilation and that kind of thing. You could go for what's called shadow gap cladding, which is where you have a gap between the cladding, and it's quite trendy at the moment. It looks very nice, but also it means that the insulation underneath will dry because there's airflow going through it. I've got no idea about the costs, really. It's really hard to say without knowing the size of the house and all of that sort of stuff, like what materials. But I know from looking at external insulation from our house, which is a bungalow, a one-story bungalow, you'd be looking at about £8,000 to £10,000 just for the external wall insulation, and then the cladding on top of that probably between £3,000 and £4,000.
So to follow on from that, where would you go to get quotes or estimates for that kind of thing then?
There's companies that that specialize in external wall insulation, especially the polystyrene type, and you can find, if you even just a Google search, you'll find companies that are doing it in Swansea. To find companies that will do natural materials, you're probably going to have to look further afield, because there's not that many people that are operating doing that kind of thing. But yeah, I can find some and send them through.
Oh, I'm sure.
So,
Peter's got another question. Air source heat pump, 15k pounds. Tesla 12 kilowatt battery, £12,000. 8 kilowatt rooftop solar, £8,000, total £35,000. What would you prioritize? What schemes would you use to subsidize the cost? And what about renewable heating homes incentives? You said a bit about that.
Wow, Peter, you've gone hard on the technical questions. I appreciate that. I would definitely say rooftop solar would be a priority. I think for me, if the bill saving isn't so much of an issue, then I personally don't feel I need to go off grid in a sort of political sense, in that if you've got solar panels on your roof, you can feed into the grid when you're creating excess energy, and you can draw down energy in the evenings when you're not creating energy. Because they've got rid of the feed-in tariff, you're not going to get very much money for feeding into the grid. So that does like sort of put me off wanting to do it. But in terms of like a global energy use, then actually feeding into the grid is a positive thing. So it means that other people can draw that down, then not firing up a coal-fired power station, that kind of thing. And also batteries do have a lot of precious metals. You know, to create a battery uses a lot of energy and non-renewable materials. So I probably wouldn't be looking at a battery unless I needed to be off grid for some reason. But I'm totally up for being wrong about that. Yeah, an air source heat pump, they're getting quite good now. There was a long period where they generally just broke, but yeah, we've just got one at Down to Earth where I work, after a history of having ones breaking, and it seems to be doing really well. So yeah, go for air source heat pump.
Okay, thanks. Maddie, I'll unmute you. Yeah, Maddie.
Yeah, my mum's got an old boiler. It's about 23 years old. It's a Worcester combi boiler. And the gas man came this week to say that a valve had gone and may not be able to replace it, in which case she'd need to replace her boiler. What would you suggest that she replaces it with that's sustainable?
Yeah, I guess just a really highly efficient small tank boiler. And then then switching to some sort of renewable energy company using green gas. I mean, it's not ideal, but if you've got a gas boiler and a gas heating system, I think to get rid of that and to put in electric is probably going to have a higher carbon cost than to just go with gas, if you know what I mean. Like, kind of going back to the quote at the beginning, the most eco house or most sustainable house is the one that's already standing. So if you've already got a gas heating system in your house, to convert it to electric, you've got to put in a lot of new stuff which has a carbon cost, and that could outweigh the cost of that carbon, because green gas does have a low carbon cost, but it does have a carbon cost.
What's a small tank boiler, Adam?
That was such an untechnical word for just a boiler with a small cylinder in it.
A boiler with a small
Yeah,
cylinder.
not like a huge tank where you're heating a lot of water that you're not going to use if she lives on her own.
So it wouldn't be a combi boiler.
Yeah, a combi boiler. You're getting into an area where this is really not my area in terms of
Okay,
boilers and stuff.
thank you.
Okay. Pauline, is that a question or is that a statement? Looks like a statement to me.
Yeah, I think that's interesting about the air source heating is that, yeah, the upfront cost is quite high, and the savings will take quite a while to come through and possibly might not even save. But I guess if there's another motive, which is you want to be off grid or you want to have, you want to improve your own environmental credentials, then I guess you've got to factor that in as well. I think part of what I was trying to say in the talk is that a lot of these measures aren't going to pay for themselves. So there has to be another motivation to doing it, whether you want to live a more sustainable life. In terms of the insulation, I didn't talk about it too much, but houses that are really heavily insulated are much more comfortable and nice to be in. And I guess it's about selling those aspects as well as the bill savings, because with an air source heat pump, I'm not sure you are going to see those savings in the near future kind of thing.
Okay, Rhiannon would like to ask about Georgian character detached house.
Yeah, so I've been trying to research this topic for quite a while and haven't really got very far. So thank you for the talk, it was really useful. So I've done all the low hanging fruit on my house. So it's all double glazed, insulated the loft, and we had a loft conversion. We put solar panels and a new roof on. Our boiler is, I think, probably coming to the end of its working life. And we had a few issues last year. It's been okay this winter. And I've tried to contact surveyors to kind of come and do a survey really on what else I could do to increase the efficiency of the property. But they just don't seem very interested. And I just wondered if there's any company or any surveyor or anyone that you know that you would recommend, because I guess my motivation is also to kind of try and lower my carbon footprint. I also have my gas and electricity from Ecotricity, so I'm kind of trying to do all the the obvious stuff, but I think my house is probably not I'm not sure external wall insulation would work, because it's kind of from the outside, it's quite aesthetically pleasing. It's got a lot of features inside. So I'm just thinking of other ways that I could make it more insulated. And yeah, just kind of more comfortable to live in.
Yeah, I'm just trying to find the name of it. There's a list of people that are involved in green building. I think it's called the Green Building Register or something like that. Sue, is there a way that is Sue still there? That I could post a list of links and then you could share them?
Yes, we'll do that, because we'll be sharing the video with people.
Yeah,
Chris does.
That's right.
So there's essentially a list of people that are involved in green building who can register and go through this course and put their name down on this register. So they'd be great people to contact.
Okay.
I'll find out the name of that register. It's slipped my mind at the moment.
Yeah,
but that would
great.
be great. It might involve getting someone from a bit further afield, but there's definitely people out there that are doing this sort of thing. It's probably quite unlikely that there's someone in Swansea doing natural green retrofit, because I could imagine that I'd have heard of them if they were doing it. But there's definitely people in Wales and in the UK that are doing it. So yeah,
Okay,
I'll post.
I'm in Cardiff. I'm actually in Cardiff, but I was given the name of a company in Bristol called the Cheese Project. Have you heard of them?
The Cheese Project.
Yeah, apparently they are kind of. It's only yesterday I was given that name on another call I was on, but I wondered whether apparently they're doing good things. So I'm going to contact them. I'm on holiday at the moment when I come back next week. Just going to contact
Yeah.
them to see whether they might be able to help.
I've just found it. It's called the Green Register.
Okay, great.
Not a very imaginative name, but
Green.
Thank you. And then when it comes to kind of heat pumps, I mean, what I was heard about heat pumps are A, they're expensive, B, you often have to dig up your garden, C, you normally need loads of new radiators, and D, the amount of heat that it generates, the heat isn't kind of, warmth isn't as great as it would for boiler. So when you kind of add all those things up, it just seems like a not very appealing thing to do. So I just wondered what's your view really on those heat pumps?
on ground source heat pumps, that is.
All right, okay. See, I don't know the
Yeah.
difference.
I think, so yeah, ground source is where you essentially dig a like a long trench into your garden or into a piece of land, and then you bury a pipe in it, so it's using the heat of the ground, which is a couple of the science of it blows my mind, and I can't quite wrap my head around it, but because it's a couple of degrees lower, the coolant's pumped through it, and a small amount of electricity is applied, which manages to create more heat, essentially. And it's the same principle as with an air source heat pump. So it takes the slight difference in temperature and increases temperature. But in terms of the actual installation, I guess it depends. I don't know about your living situation, but if you can get other people who live near you to want to invest in it, then you're massively sharing those costs, because if you dig up a piece of land and put in the infrastructure for 3 houses, you're splitting that whole cost between 3 houses. Whereas it depends on the house, but yeah, to fit ground source heat pumps, you're looking at quite a significant cost for one household.
Actually, we have another question about linking up, a bit from Leonie. Are there significant savings if we link up and do a number of houses at the same time? I presume Leonie means any of the other methods that you've talked about, as well as ground source heat pumps.
Yeah, so that's an interesting one. There's a company called Energy Sprong, which is Dutch company, I think. And essentially what they're doing is they're doing prefabricated retrofit. So this is with the external wall insulation. So they've so far taken terraced houses, generally kind of ex-council houses or council houses that have got a uniform front, and they measure it up, take all the measurements, then take it away to the factory, and they prefabricate panels that fit in. And then the householders move out for a week, they go on holiday, and the company comes in and they essentially retrofit these panels. They crane them in that have been made in a factory and clad the entire inside of the houses. And then the people come back from holiday a week later and their house has been retrofitted. And you can do a whole street at a time. Obviously, it works much better with kind of 70s, 80s style pebble dash housing, but there is a lot of that in Swansea. And yeah, you can make massive savings because you're doing an entire street at a time. You've only got one work crew there. So yeah, that kind of thing would be a massive saving if you could get Energy Sprong to do it. If you could get a whole street together and do any of these methods, even with a more sort of piecemeal method with external wall insulation, you're going to make massive savings again, because you've only got to set the scaffolding up once. You can bulk buy materials, all of those sorts of things. Again, the same with solar panels. Again, the same with ground source heat pumps, all of those sorts of things. If people can form a energy cooperative or a retrofit cooperative on your street, then you're going to make massive savings, and those costs are going to come right down, and it might start to pay for itself in bill savings. That's a great point.
Well, that might link up with Gerrit's question about the Welsh government considering grants.
Yeah, I was just wondering, do you know if the Welsh government is considering some type of green homes grant or maybe, I don't know, 0% interest loans or something? Do you know if they're working on something?
I haven't seen anything that they're working on at the moment that they've released, but in terms of what people can do, obviously you can, you know, fix your windows and that sort of thing, but going, you know, long term is like start lobbying MPs and bringing this sort of stuff and saying, you know, that this is something that they're doing in France, because quite often, like, I really like Julie James, but she is not an expert in housing, really. She's an expert in being a politician, and quite often they won't have heard of these things going on in other countries. And if you can find details of this and just say, look, in France, they're making it work, they're doing retrofit and it's 0% interest and they're reducing VAT and this sort of stuff. This is an option that we could go for. And I think if, you know, it would only take 10 or 20 people sending them letters suggesting these things before it starts to be seriously considered. But yeah, I don't think they are at the moment, but yeah, that's definitely something people could do.
You might like to come, Garrett, to the a fortnight tonight. We're doing a climate hustings with all the parties, sending a representative. It may well be Julie James, because she's our candidate here, and ask that question. So a fortnight tonight, from 7 till 9.
Great idea. Hannah Lawson, are you there, Hannah?
Hi, yes, I'm here. Thanks, Adam. That was really interesting, especially the statistics about how many of us are still going to be living in older houses in the future. I was looking at it from the point of view of council planning applications, and I was wondering how much you know about how many of these issues are already written into consideration in planning applications, and what you think councils could do better to try and ensure that when buildings are being updated, when applications are put in to convert new buildings, or to convert old buildings, sorry, into either other use or you know, various applications, what you think would be the best use of that process in order to try and make sure that energy efficiency is built into that?
Yeah, I think, yeah, in terms of planning, it is quite mind-boggling that in terms of new build, that they're not, that the standards aren't very high. And in converting a property that's commercial or a barn or that sort of thing, the standards are even lower. And yeah, I think that is a big thing that they could do, is because definitely in England, there's been this white paper published, which they want to make it much easier for people to convert commercial buildings into residential buildings. You wouldn't even need to get planning permission. You would just get permitted development rights on there. And in terms of planning policy, Wales is a bit more progressive, but does tend to follow what happens in England. And I think is likely to go that same way, because there's such a pressure to provide housing at the moment. And yeah, I think that is a huge thing to consider, is, are these houses actually going to be efficient? Because if you're turning a building that was a shop into a house, you're already on the back foot, because it's got massive windows, it's got, you know, it's not built for people to live in, kind of thing. So I think that is a huge thing that planners can do, is to stipulate those kind of things. Yeah, and I think as people, environmentally conscious people, I think constantly keeping that pressure up on the council, because I think that's getting involved in the housing industry, just the lobbying that goes on from developers to the council. It's quite amazing that the council have you know, not completely relented, because there's no lobbying coming from the other side, from people wanting sustainability, all of these sorts of things. So I think that's a massive thing we can do, is even just match the lobbying that's coming from the housing developers, because they've got so much money and so much sway. And really at the moment, the ball's in their park, because the government, the council, we need more houses. And at the moment, they're the only ones that are able to, we think are able to provide it. So I could go off on a big rant about housing developers, but I won't.
Okay. can you recommend someone to do an efficiency audit? This is Anna Williams' question.
Again, that's not really, yeah, I guess just the Green Register would be a good place to start. I'll have a look after this talk about people to do that. But yeah, that's getting a little bit out of my, like, actually recommending people's. Yeah, I'd say check out the Green Register, definitely first.
Okay. What's the next question? Oh, Leonie. Yeah. Leonie? About solar versus ground source heat pumps.
Okay, yeah, I had a few questions, but yeah, in terms of effectiveness, because solar isn't all that effective, even with south facing, which option would you advise? And also you were talking about Pebble Dash, and a lot of the Pebble Dash here is stone houses, which are, of course, have their own significant issues in insulation. Thank you.
Yeah, so ground source heat pumps would just provide heat for a house. So which is good. They're more efficient, but obviously solar panels are going to provide electricity, so they're going to keep the lights on, you know, charge a battery that's going to power your laptop, all of that sort of stuff. So yeah, solar panels are less efficient, and obviously you only have it whilst it's sunny, whereas a ground source heat pump provides heat the entire time, but it obviously doesn't create electricity, so you'd still have to be buying electricity from the grid. But you can buy 100% renewable electricity, but you can't buy 100% renewable gas for heating. So if it's possible to fit, if it's possible and cost effective, would be to have both, because you'd have the ground source heat pump providing your heating, because it's efficient at providing heating, and then solar panels providing your electricity. Yeah, I'm not sure if you could do one or the other, which way I would go. I guess you'd have to decide which was more important to you, I think.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much indeed. I'm looking through the comments. There are a number of comments there, but I think we're out of time, are we? Sue or Chris?
Yeah, could I just say thank you very much, Adam, and anything you'd like to send through, if you could send it through on that email address I sent you today, then I can actually put it up with the recording, which will be available for everybody on our Swansea XR talk. So
yeah, I've just seen someone's mentioned the Carbon Co-op in Manchester, which I've also heard of, which would, yeah, definitely check that out. And yeah, maybe other people, if you've got any ideas for people you could recommend for actual providers of retrofit and stuff, that would be great, because yeah, I haven't done a lot of research into actual people that are providing it, apart from locally in Swansea.
Well, Dan has actually recommended somebody and put the phone number, so that's all in the chat. If you want to save the chat, if you go down to the bottom and where it says messages to everyone, 3 little dots on the right hand side, and you can save the chat and it will end up somewhere on your computer. But I suggest you look for it straight away, where it'll be on the desktop, rather than leave it, because I can never find them afterwards. Okay.
Great. So from me, thank you very much for listening. And those were some very thought-provoking questions, I think. I've got a big list of stuff I'm going to research now again. So yeah, thank you.
I think we'd like to thank you very much for a fascinating talk with filled with information, and more power to your elbow. Let's hope you get things actually happening faster than they are now. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.
Thank you, Adam. Bye.
Thanks, Adam. It was great. Thank you.
Thanks, Adam.
Bye.
Thanks, Adam.